Good evening and welcome to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art's virtual programming. I am Dr. Erica Knuckles, Director of Learning, Engagement, and Partnerships here at the Westmoreland. I would like to begin our program with a moment of acknowledgements. The Westmoreland Museum of American Art is situated upon the traditional lands of the Adena, Hopewell, Monongahela, Delaware, Shawnee, and Seneca Cayuga peoples. We honor all of the indigenous nations and their land with great gratitude and acknowledge the genocide and continuous displacement of indigenous peoples. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built this country during the colonial era and beyond. We acknowledge the harm inflicted upon the indigenous communities and people of color across the country, which guides and inspires our work as a museum. Thank you all for tuning in to our Border Cantos Sonic Border exhibition program this evening. Support for this program has been provided by Art Bridges. Tonight, we will be experiencing a unique performance by artist Guillermo Galindo. He performs his original score, Sonic Border, using instruments he created from discarded objects found and collected at the Mexican-American border by photographer Richard Misrach. Guillermo will be joining us live from the Westmoreland after the performance to discuss his work, as well as answer any of your questions. So feel free to post in the chat during the performance, as well as during the discussion. Let's watch the performance, shall we? I hope you enjoyed this fascinating performance. And now I would like to introduce Guillermo Galindo, post-Mexican composer and artist, who is here at the Westmoreland in the Border Cantos Sonic Border exhibition. The extent of the work of experimental composer, sonic architect, performance artist, and visual media artist Guillermo Galindo redefines the conventional limits between music, the art of music composition, and the intersections between art disciplines, politics, humanitarian issues, spirituality, and social awareness. His work has been featured by media around the world in London, Japan, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, and Mexico, as well as in Art in America, the New Republic, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and on CNN and NPR. Please welcome Guillermo Galindo.
Hello.
Hello, Guillermo. Welcome to Greensburg, to the Westmoreland.
Hello, Erica.
It's so nice to have you here this evening.
Thank
And
you.
I wanted to start off really having you tell us how this all began. How did you come to collaborate with photographer Richard Misrach on this project?
Well, it's a long story. I started building my own sonic devices for a quintet, for a traditional Western music quintet called Quinteto Latino. They commissioned me a piece and they told me to write a piece with a Latin American subject. So it occurred to me after hearing a documentary about objects and personal items that were abandoned in the border, it occurred to me that I could make sonic devices or instruments, as we call them, from these personal items, based in the theory, the Colombian theory, that if you build an instrument, a musical instrument or a sonic device out of personal objects, you can heal people that were owned the object previously. So what I did is I did this piece for the Quinteto Latino. And while I was building these instruments, Daniel Alarcón, that is a Peruvian poet, asked me if I could perform in the Pop-Up magazine, that is an event in San Francisco, if I could perform my instruments while he was reciting a narrative about immigration and the immigrants and the journey of the immigrants. So I agreed. And I didn't imagine that this performance was going to be about 2,000 people there. And then after that, I finished the performance and I received an email from Richard Misrach saying, let's start a big project. I've been photographing the border for many years and I would love to collaborate with you. So that was the beginning. And then it went 4 years of work, intensive work. And we came out with the first exhibit at the San Jose Museum, and the exhibit has traveled all over the place. And finally, it's here in Greensburg. I'm very happy to see it again, and it's very beautifully put together. I'm very happy to hear my installation that is behind me. And yeah, that's it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in the performance we just watched, there really were a large range of materials that you were working with. Could you explain what some of those materials are, and really sort of what is the range of them in terms of, size and textures, and, tell us a little bit about the things that you used within your pieces.
Well, the first trip that I made was to Laredo, Texas, and I didn't know the geography very well. I thought I was going to find a desert, but it's more like a chaparral that is partly desertic and partly there's water. The Rio Grande is there, and basically the materials that I kept finding there is clothing, because what happens is the people that crosses the river kind of inflate these trash bags and put their dry clothes there, so when they arrive to the other side, they take their wet clothes and put on the dry clothes, so that they're not caught immediately by the border patrol. So I found a lot of clothing, a lot of worn out shoes that were full of sand inside, and bottles of water everywhere. It's very interesting because the first instrument that I wanted to make, I didn't know I was going to find these kind of things, and I was like, how can I make sound out of clothing? So I made this loom that has some contact mics and amplifies the texture of the clothing. And then I started using the shoes, like the shoe that you saw in the performance. That was actually one of the first pieces. And then I made these drums with the skin of the inner tires that people use to float across the river. And the Border Patrol slashes them with knives. So you see a lot of these inner tires in the American side of the river. And that was the beginning. Then I started adding more of the Border Patrol objects because I didn't want to exclude anything that happens there. So I started using the used gun shells. I have a little discarded pieces of the wall that used to hold sensors. I have, there's a lot of different things. And as I traveled west to east, and Richard traveled west to east, depending on the area where we were or where the objects were picked up, there were different kinds of materials and objects.
Wow, great. And among those, what are maybe one or two of the most surprising materials you ended up working with?
I found a lot of backpacks, and one of them touched me a lot because it was Blue's Clues. It's a personage for children, and it was a Blue's Clues backpack of a child, and it had a Fanta beverage. That is a beverage that I used to drink when I was in Mexico. It's a very popular beverage in Mexico, and it had a ball, a plain ball, and how you call it, a stuffed animal, a little animal. And it touched me a lot because it was kind of I was thinking that might have been the age of my child at the time. So it was very touching. That's one of the things I remember. But literally everything I found was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's really incredible. So how did you really learn how to make instruments out of found objects? Tell me a little bit about your background as a musician and composer and really instrument maker.
Well, the first thing I have to tell you is I went to the conservatory and to the School of Music, and they don't teach you how to make instruments there. So I had to learn on my own. But what I did learn is I studied a lot of late 20th century contemporary music, and we have what is called extended techniques that started at the beginning of the 20th century, and is a different approach to traditional instruments. So you use the violin as a percussion, or the flute as a percussion, or you use these things that are called multiphonics, and you kind of push the instrument to produce sounds that are not of traditional music of the last 600 years. Also, there's the incorporation of non-traditional instruments to the orchestra, native instruments from Mexico, from Africa, from the Middle East, with many composers, including American composers, Lou Harrison, for example. And that's one part. And the other one is I was always very attracted, since I studied film music, to the use of Foley. Foley is the technique of creating effects for films using objects, normal objects. So it's a combination between extended techniques of the 20th century and Foley.
Wow, that is really, really interesting. And can you sort of walk us through a little bit what we were seeing in terms of how you're sort of recording, really the process of recording using all of these pieces that you created?
You mean in the performance that we just saw, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Well, the first thing that I'm doing is it's a tray that has rubble, and it has a contact mic in it, and I walk the shoe or rub the shoe against the rubble, and produce this very interesting texture of people walking in the rubble. And then from there, I believe I moved to this bike that I made as a comment on Duchamp's ready-made bike, and I framed the sprockets of the bike. You can tune the sprockets of the bike, and I was kind of rotating the wheel and using a flexible object to kind of strike as I turned the wheel. And then from there, I went to play a discarded piece of the wall. That this piece of wall is very thick iron, and you come to the museum, you're going to see another piece that I made that is called the Exterminating Angel, that is also using that type of discarded part of wall. And it's one of the types of pieces of the wall, of the border wall, that are used. There are other different ones, but this in particular was used as a landing strip for helicopters in Vietnam, and I believe in Iraq. It's a very thick piece of metal, of iron, and since it's very worn out and very textured, you can rub things against it and produce different textures. I play with different objects. Actually, when I was playing it in Germany, I was using one of those combs that are like for curly hair, that have flexible metal thingies coming out of it, and I kept hitting it, and I realized it produced sparks as I hit it, and it became a very interesting spectacle to see the sparks coming out of it. And it was a surprise for me. So the basic thing is always a surprise for me to do, to use all of these things. One of the things that I used in this performance that you saw, that maybe you remember, I was bowing this instrument that has brass, metal rods coming out of it, and that's the only one that I build with items from immigrants from Europe. It's built over a pot that I found in an immigrant camp in Kassel, Germany, and it has a plate that holds the rods that I found in the island of Lesbos, that came probably from Turkey. And it's based on the instrument that is called the water phone, not because it uses water, but because the inventor's name was Water, last name was Water.
Oh, great. So we have a couple of questions from those who are viewing this evening. And actually, the first one I'm going to ask you sort of follows along the discussion line we're on right now. Were you seeking a sound when you sought the items, or sought the items and incorporated their sounds? Like, which sort of came first in your process?
That's a very good question, because it also goes into the conception of musical instruments of the pre-Columbian people. What happens in the West, in the Western music, when you build a violin or you build a flute, you're looking for a sound. You're looking for perfection of sound. And what happens in the Native American or pre-Columbian civilizations that use music is that you find the sound that the object can make. So you make the object talk. You don't force the object to produce any sound. You accept the sound that the object produces naturally, and you work with it. So that's what I did. I would go around the desert or around the tundra, not the tundra, around the chaparral, and I just pick up the instrument and hit it with something, blow on it, and try to see what sound it makes. And I go, well, this I could use.
Wow, that's so beautiful. We have another question here. Does your music replicate sounds at the border?
Yeah, it's very interesting because involuntarily, or maybe unconsciously, it does replicate landscapes, or I would say soundscapes of the border. It does replicate it, and people in several performances, I have performed this piece that you just saw in very many different places, and people tell me that they envision or imagine landscapes in the border, and not even only landscapes, but narratives and his stories. So I call it imaginary stories.
Wow, great. So here's another question that we have from one of our viewing audience members. They wanted to say that this is very fascinating, and the question is, did the Border Patrol try to interfere with your gathering of objects? And how do you decide what to make with the objects you found?
Well, the first time that I went to Laredo, I was in a private property, and the property, part of the property was the edge of the river, and I found stuff there. And then I told the person there, I told him to introduce me to one of the Border Patrol people, and this person was nice enough to let me into other areas that were more restricted. And one of the times that I went with Richard Misrach to the border, we went to this very, very isolated place, and he said, you're gonna wait just 30 seconds, and they had already identified us with the sensors. So that it was, we saw the car of the Border Patrol coming from very far away. And then when they arrived, they asked us what we were doing there. And I always let Richard do the talking because he looks more American than me, probably. And
Wow, yeah.
he talked to them, and he told them that we're doing a project, that he's a photographer, that he's been photographing for many years. And they told us that it was dangerous. And Richard asked them to protect us, and they were very happy to say yes. And they asked us for our ID, and they didn't bother us anymore, fortunately.
Wow. So just quickly, can you explain the sound that is playing behind you?
Oh yeah, that sound is from the shell piñata. That is a piñata that is all built of metal, and it's based in the shekere, that is a Cuban instrument that you shake. And instead of shells that the original shekere uses, I use gun shells, empty gun shells from the Border Patrol. And they are very colorful. And it's kind of, I think they call it tongue-in-cheek comment on, on the on the gun shells and the shells and the piñata. It's a very festive Mexican item. And you shake it, and you can hit it like a percussion, and it produces very beautiful sounds, very percussive. It's the main percussion on the whole installation that uses 8 instruments, and you can see if you come over to the museum. You can hear, not you can see. You can see and hear.
Yes, I love that there is that element of sound with the exhibition. So we're not just seeing the instruments, we're also getting to hear them and to hear your composition. And along those lines, what would you consider the most challenging aspect of composing music with non-traditional instruments?
That's a really good question. Well, probably the most challenging thing is that you're on your own, and you're lost. You can get lost. There's no protocol, there's no baggage, because those instruments are one of a kind. There's just one in the world of each of them. And you design how you're going to play them. Nobody's going to tell you because they don't carry any history in the past, or they don't carry any baggage. You just are on your own. You're lost. You're lost there, and it's a challenge to be lost because we want to know where we're going, and we want to have an idea of our plan, an idea of how things are going to be, how things are going to sound. But to allow things to happen is a challenge, and it's a very humbling attitude. Not only writing music or this music, but it's a humbling attitude for everything. And also knowing that these items once belonged to somebody that was looking for a better future and that was going through a journey, and that probably is not around us anymore. And that's a challenge. It's a very emotional challenge, and it has its technical challenges too. How do you make music with these, and what do you want to hear? What are the instruments telling you?
Wow, yeah. So we do have time for one or two more questions. And here's another one from one of our viewers this evening. Did you rehearse or have a general idea of how you would move through the installation? It seems like you listen and respond to what happens live, and it's very moving.
Yes, it's both things. There's this thing that is called control improvisation. That actually this morning I was talking to somebody here at the museum about. It's very interesting. For example, in jazz, you have these frames of time that are the measures in a score. And in jazz, that is an improvisatory type of music. You are allowed to do certain kinds of things within a frame of time, and you're not allowed to do certain other things. So from jazz and from controlled improvisation, I establish frames of things that I can do, things that I cannot do, and establish a number of activities, sonic activities or sounds that I would do in a frame of time. There's very specific ones and there's very open ones. For example, sometimes I specify how loud they are, how busy there is, if they're rhythmic, if they are not rhythmic. And then I respond to my own sounds and try to make a narrative out of what is happening live, what is naturally planned ahead, and some of it is not planned ahead. There's a piece by John Cage that is called Water Music, and you can Google it or see it in YouTube. And it's a set of activities to be completed in an amount of time, certain sonic activities, turning on a radio, banging on something. And I thought of it, since Cage is very influential in my work, I kind of think of this piece as a ritualistic piece, which is when you're doing a ritual, you have a set of things that are to be completed in a certain amount of time. So that's the whole frame of where I'm working.
So interesting. So I have one more question for you this evening, Guillermo. How do you hope visitors to Border Canto Sonic Border, or I'm sorry, what do you hope visitors to Border Canto Sonic Border will take away from the exhibition and your work?
I would like the visitors to arrive and let go of any preconceptions of the border, of what they hear in politics or from people in power say about the border, and let go all of that and just blank your mind and absorb what me and Richard have elaborated as a human experience with the language of art. And what they should take with it is whatever the narrative of their minds produces out of experiencing. It's an experience, it's not a didactic or imposing narrative or imposing idea. It's the evidence of what is happening, of what has happened, and it's the evidence that it's and a story that is told with the language of the visual arts and music and sound.
Well, thank you so much, Guillermo, for this moving performance and discussion. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you very much, Erica.
I'd like to thank our members and museum staff, and a gracious thank you to everyone that has joined us this evening. Border Cantos Sonic Border opens for members on May 29th and for the general public on May 30th. The exhibition runs through September 5th of 2021 and is organized by Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, with additional loans from the artists. Support for this exhibition has been provided by Art Bridges, the Hillman Exhibition Fund of the Westmoreland Museum of American Art, and Opportunity Fund. Please make sure you check the museum's website at thewestmoreland.org for more upcoming programs and to reserve your tickets to see the exhibition. Thank you and good night.